I never imagined it would come to this. The person I loved, the person I trusted with everything, the one I thought would stand by me no matter what, accused me of something I would never do. It all started one normal evening when the world felt like it was still okay. We had just finished dinner, a quiet night at home. The kids were in bed, and it was just me and James sitting on the couch. He had always been the calm one, the protector. I thought I knew him, and I thought he knew me. But that night, everything changed. "Sophia, where did you put it?" James asked, his voice unusually sharp. I looked up from my phone, a little confused. "Put what, James?" "The necklace," he snapped. "The one I bought you for our anniversary. It's gone, and I know you took it." My heart sank. What was he talking about? I hadn't seen the necklace since we put it in the drawer where we keep our valuables. I tried to explain, but before I could get a word out, James was already accusing me. "Don't lie, Sophia," he continued, his voice now cold. "I know it's gone. You've been spending so much money lately. Where else would it be? You must have sold it or hidden it somewhere." I was in shock. How could he say that? I had never stolen a thing in my life, let alone from him. But there was no doubt in his eyes, no trace of the man I married. It felt like a slap to my face. "James, I didn't take it," I said, my voice shaking. But he wouldn't listen. "Then where is it, Sophia? Tell me where it is," he demanded, standing up. The accusation hit me like a freight train. How could I defend myself when the one person who was supposed to believe in me was turning against me? I felt tears welling up, but I refused to let them fall. I had to stay strong. I had to prove him wrong. "You're being unreasonable." I didn't do anything. I tried again, my hands trembling. But James was already on the phone, calling our neighbors, accusing them of stealing the necklace. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Was he really willing to destroy everything over something like this? I stood there, feeling the walls close in around me, trying to hold it together. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake, replaying the conversation in my mind, the pain of the accusation cutting through me. I loved James, but this wasn't just a misunderstanding anymore. Something had shifted, something I couldn't ignore. The more I thought about it, the more it seemed like I was trapped in a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. The next morning, James was still cold, still distant. He barely spoke to me, his eyes full of suspicion. I knew he thought I was guilty. He had already made up his mind. And that's when I realized I needed to do something. I had to prove myself, not just to him, but to myself. I wasn't going to let him destroy me with an accusation like that. But what I didn't know was that the truth was about to be revealed in a way none of us could have ever imagined. The next few days were the worst of my life. Every time I looked at James, I could feel the weight of his mistrust hanging over me. It was like we were strangers, living in the same house, with no understanding between us. The man I once loved, the one I believed in, had turned into a shadow of someone I barely recognized. His eyes, once warm and full of love, now looked at me like I was a criminal. Each moment I spent in that suffocating silence made my blood boil. I couldn't shake the feeling that everything I had worked for, everything I had built with James, was slowly crumbling. I was no longer just fighting to prove my innocence. I was fighting to save my dignity, my marriage, my entire life. But it wasn't just James's coldness that was breaking me. The whispers had started. I could feel the judgment in the eyes of our friends, our neighbors, even the people at work. Everyone had heard the accusation, and now they were watching me, waiting for me to slip up. I saw it in the way they glanced at me, the way they no longer treated me the same. It was like I was guilty by association, and I hadn't even done anything wrong. That night, when I found myself alone in the living room, the house eerily quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator, I couldn't take it anymore. I needed answers, not just for myself, but for James too. He had already made up his mind, but I wasn't going to let him tear me down without a fight. I was stronger than that. I went straight to our bedroom and opened the drawer where we kept our important papers. There, tucked beneath a pile of old bills, was the key. The key to everything. James hadn't been entirely honest with me when he accused me of taking the necklace, and that was something I was about to uncover. I pulled out a small envelope and opened it. Inside was a letter, dated a few weeks before the accusation. It was a letter from a private investigator. My heart stopped as I read through it. The letter confirmed what I had suspected but didn't want to believe. James had hired someone to follow me, to spy on me, to make sure I was behaving. The realization hit me like a punch to the stomach. All this time, I had trusted him with everything, and he had been secretly monitoring my every move. He didn't believe in me anymore. He didn't trust me. He had taken it a step further, hiring someone to gather evidence that would prove his suspicions. I had to sit down. My hands were shaking as I gripped the letter, trying to process what I had just uncovered. But I wasn't just going to let him get away with this. The accusation, the betrayal, everything. It had gone too far. I needed to act fast. I had to find the necklace, not because I was worried about the physical item itself, but because I knew that if I didn't, James would never stop. He would continue to accuse me, to tear me apart from the inside out, until I had nothing left. I had to take control of this situation, and I had to do it now. The next morning, I told James I was going out. He barely looked up from his coffee as I spoke, his cold stare making my skin crawl. But I didn't care. I had a plan. I drove to the jewelry store where we had bought the necklace. The salesperson recognized me immediately, and I didn't waste any time. "Do you still have a record of the purchase I made a year ago?" I asked, my voice steady but firm. After a few minutes of searching, she handed me the receipt. My heart pounded in my chest as I read it. The necklace had been paid for in full with no outstanding balances. It was mine, and James had no idea. But there was more. As I was about to leave, something caught my eye in the store window. A ring, sparkling and beautiful, sat in the display. It was a piece I knew James had been eyeing for months, a symbol of something he had wanted to buy me for our anniversary. But it wasn't just a gift. It was a way for him to control me. I had seen the way he'd talked about it, as if buying me that ring would somehow make everything right again, would make up for the mistrust that had been growing between us. I could feel the anger bubbling up inside me, and for the first time in days, I felt a sense of clarity. I wasn't just going to prove my innocence, I was going to take back my power. As I left the store, I knew what I had to do. I had to expose James for who he truly was, to show him that I wasn't going to stand by while he tore me down. He had betrayed me in ways I hadn't even known, but I was going to prove him wrong in the most dramatic way possible. I spent the next few days planning everything out. I knew James would be expecting me to back down, to let this blow over. But that wasn't going to happen. I wasn't going to let him walk all over me. especially after everything he had done. The betrayal stung more than the accusation itself. It was the fact that he had decided I was guilty without even listening to my side of the story. He had made up his mind, and I had to make sure that when I confronted him, he would see the truth, my truth. I waited until the weekend when he would be at work. I knew his routine. He'd leave early in the morning and wouldn't be back until late afternoon. That gave me the perfect window of time to execute my plan. But I needed something more than just the receipt for the necklace. I had to make sure that James would be forced to face the consequences of his actions. So I made a phone call. I reached out to the private investigator who had been hired to follow me. I didn't know how he would react, but I needed to get him on my side. When he answered, his voice was cold and distant, as if he was just doing a job. But I wasn't going to let that stop me. "I know what you've been doing," I said, keeping my voice calm. "I know you've been following me." There was a brief pause on the other end of the line. Then, in a low voice, he responded, "I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't lie to me," I snapped. "James hired you to spy on me. I'm not going to stand by while he ruins my life." The investigator was silent for a moment, and I could tell that he was weighing his options. "Look, I was just doing what I was paid to do," he said. "But you're right. This isn't right. If you want to expose him, I can help. But you need to understand, this isn't going to be easy." I took a deep breath. "I'm not asking for easy. I want the truth. I need it all. Every piece of information you've gathered. Everything." There was a pause before he spoke again. "All right, I'll send you everything. But this is your mess to clean up. I won't be involved any further after that." I hung up the phone, my heart racing. I had the information I needed. Now, I just had to make sure I used it in the most impactful way. The afternoon came, and I could feel my nerves starting to take over, but I pushed them aside. I had no choice. I had to do this. When James walked in that evening, he looked at me with the same cold, accusing eyes. I could see the doubt in his expression, the suspicion that had been eating away at him for days. He didn't even greet me. He just dropped his bag and started heading for the kitchen. "James," I called, my voice steady, though my heart was pounding in my chest. "We need to talk." He didn't turn around at first, but then, slowly, he faced me, his brow furrowed. "About what?" "About everything," I said, taking a deep breath. "About the necklace, the accusation, and the lies you've been telling yourself." I could see the flicker of defensiveness in his eyes, but I didn't care. I wasn't backing down anymore. This was my moment. "I know you hired someone to follow me," I said, my voice firm. "I know everything. And you know what? It wasn't just the necklace. It's about trust. You don't trust me anymore, do you, James?" His face paled, but he didn't say anything. He was too stunned by my knowledge, and I wasn't done yet. "I have the receipts for the necklace," I continued. "And I know you've been hiding something from me. You think I don't know, but I do. You think I've been blind, but I haven't. I've been watching too. Watching you, watching us, and I'm done." James opened his mouth, but no words came out. He was caught off guard, and for the first time in days, I saw a crack in his armor. The man who had accused me, who had turned everything upside down, was finally speechless. "I'm done letting you accuse me without reason," I said. "I've been quiet for far too long, letting you walk all over me, but not anymore. You wanted to destroy my reputation? You wanted to break me down? Well, James, the joke's on you. You've been played. I'm the one who's been in control the whole time." I pulled out the letter from the private investigator and threw it onto the table in front of him. His eyes scanned the page, his face falling as he realized I knew everything. "I'm not the one who's been lying here," I said, my voice growing stronger with every word. "It's you, James, and I'm going to make sure everyone knows the truth." He stood there, frozen, as the reality of what I was saying began to sink in. I wasn't just going to let him get away with this. I wasn't just going to stand there and let him accuse me for something I didn't do. I was going to expose him in front of everyone, our friends, our family, the people who had once believed in him. And once I did, he would realize that the real thief was the one who had stolen my trust. James stood there, his mouth agape, staring at the letter I had thrown onto the table. His face was a mixture of disbelief and anger. But inside, I could feel a strange sense of satisfaction. I had waited for this moment. I had built up the courage to finally confront him, to make him see the truth. And now that it was out in the open, there was no going back. He grabbed the letter with trembling hands, reading it over and over again as if he couldn't believe what he was seeing. But I knew better. He wasn't confused. He was just trying to figure out how to spin the situation in his favor, how to turn the tables and make me look like the villain. I had seen that look in his eyes before. The one that said he thought he was always the smartest person in the room, the one who could control everything and everyone. I wasn't going to let him do that again. "Sofia, this is ridiculous," he finally said, his voice low, but his tone was sharp. "You're taking this way too far. This is all just a misunderstanding." I shook my head. "No, James, this isn't a misunderstanding. This is you, lying to me and everyone else around us. You hired a private investigator to spy on me. You've been treating me like I'm some kind of criminal, and for what? Because I couldn't live up to whatever twisted expectations you had?" He opened his mouth to argue, but I cut him off. "No, I'm done. I'm not going to sit here and listen to you gaslight me. You've already made up your mind about me. You've already decided I'm guilty of something I didn't do, and you've broken my trust in ways I can't even begin to explain." There was a long silence as he sat back in his chair, staring at the letter in front of him, his face a mixture of frustration and regret. I could see the guilt beginning to creep in, but it was too late. I wasn't here to fix things. I wasn't here to beg for his forgiveness. I was here to take back control of my life. "I never thought you'd do something like this, James," I continued, my voice steady. "I always believed in us, in what we had. But now I see the truth. I see who you really are. You don't trust me. You never did. You've been hiding behind your insecurities, and now you're trying to destroy me." His expression shifted, and I could see the anger rising within him. "You don't know what you're talking about," he snapped. "I did this because I care about you. I was worried. I didn't know what else to do. You've been spending money, disappearing for hours, and I didn't know who you were anymore." My heart broke at his words, but I refused to let it show. I had heard all this before. The excuses, the justifications, the lies wrapped in a thin veil of concern. But I wasn't falling for it anymore. "I don't need your concern, James," I said, my voice hardening. "I don't need you to control me, to accuse me of things I haven't done, to make me feel like I'm walking on eggshells all the time. I don't need any of it." I could see the cracks in his armor now. His hands were clenched into fists, his jaw tight with anger. "So what now, Sofia?" he spat. "You're just going to walk away?" You're going to throw everything away over one mistake? I took a step closer to him, feeling the weight of everything I had been carrying for so long. This isn't one mistake, James, I said quietly. This is years of distrust, years of accusations, and years of living in a relationship where I was never enough. I've given everything for this marriage, for this family, and this is how you repay me? James opened his mouth, but no words came out. He was realizing, in that moment, that I wasn't the person who had been in the wrong. It was him. He had been so focused on controlling everything around him, on keeping his perfect image intact, that he had lost sight of the one thing that truly mattered: trust. I don't need your approval anymore, I said, turning away from him. I'm done with the lies, the manipulation, and the constant second-guessing. I'm done trying to fix something that you don't even want to fix. I walked toward the door, my heart pounding in my chest. This was it. This was the moment when I was taking back control. I wasn't going to let him tear me down anymore. I wasn't going to let him make me feel like I was nothing. As I opened the door, I heard him call out to me. Sofia, wait, please. We can fix this. Just give me a chance. But I didn't turn around. I didn't need to hear any more empty promises. I had already made my decision. I don't think we can fix this, James, I said, my voice breaking just slightly, because I'm not the one who needs fixing. I left the house that day, not with a sense of relief, but with a feeling of empowerment. I was no longer tied to someone who didn't trust me, someone who thought they could control my every move. I was finally free. But the truth was, I hadn't even begun to expose everything yet. There was still more to come. The truth that would reveal who James really was to everyone who had ever believed in him. The days after I left James were filled with a whirlwind of emotions. At first, I thought I'd feel relief, that I'd be free from the constant pressure, the accusations, and the distrust. But the reality was far from that. There was a part of me that felt hollow, like I was walking around with a piece of me missing. I had given so much to James, to our marriage, to our family, and now I had nothing but this empty feeling inside. But as time passed, I realized that what I had lost wasn't as important as what I had gained. I had taken back control of my life. I wasn't waiting for anyone's approval anymore. I was no longer hiding in the shadows of a relationship built on lies and manipulation. I couldn't keep quiet, though. I couldn't let James get away with everything he had done. The truth needed to come out, and I was determined to make sure it did. It all started when I received an unexpected email. It was from the private investigator, the one who had been hired to spy on me. I had almost forgotten about him after our phone conversation, but there it was, sitting in my inbox. I opened it, my heart pounding in my chest, and started reading. The email was simple, with a brief message. Everything you asked for has been attached. The truth needs to be seen. Good luck. I clicked open the attachment, and what I saw nearly made me drop my phone. There, in black and white, were documents that exposed more than just James's secret investigation into my life. These weren't just ordinary receipts or notes. These were bank statements, email threads, and text messages, proof of everything I needed to tear James apart. Among the documents, I found multiple transactions for large sums of money that James had withdrawn from our joint account without my knowledge. The amounts were too large to be ignored. I thought back to the times he had made excuses for not having enough money, blaming it on the bills or the kids' needs. It was all a lie. He had been siphoning money from us for months, if not longer. He had been planning something, and it wasn't just about the necklace. It was about control, about getting rid of me and keeping everything to himself. There was more. In one of the email threads, James had been in contact with a lawyer, discussing the possibility of divorce. He had been planning this behind my back, setting up everything so that he would be the one to walk away with everything. He didn't care about the truth. He didn't care about our family. He only cared about himself. I sat there, staring at the screen, the weight of the betrayal crashing down on me again. I had always suspected something wasn't right, but seeing it all laid out in front of me was a punch to the gut. James had been manipulating me the whole time, and now I had the proof I needed to expose him for what he truly was. I couldn't just keep this information to myself. It was time to take action, to expose James for the liar he was. The first step was to reach out to the people who had supported him, who had blindly trusted him. I couldn't let them continue to think he was the perfect husband, the perfect father. He needed to be held accountable for what he had done, and I was going to make sure that happened. I knew where to start. Our closest friends, Catherine and Ben, had been some of the first people James and I had confided in when things were good. They had always been on our side, always had our back. But I had no choice now. I had to make them see the truth, even if it meant shattering their view of James. I met with them the next day at a small coffee shop. As I walked in, I saw Catherine and Ben sitting at a corner table, their faces lighting up when they saw me. But I could tell something was off. They were nervous, almost like they had been expecting this meeting but weren't sure what it was about. "Hey, Sofia, how are you?" Catherine asked, her voice soft but concerned. "I'm fine," I said, taking a deep breath. "But there's something you both need to know. Something you don't know about James." I could see the confusion in their eyes, but I wasn't going to back down. I pulled out my phone and showed them the documents from the private investigator. They took one look at the screen, and their faces went pale. "What is this?" Ben asked, his voice shaking. "Where did you get this?" "It's the truth," I said, my voice steady. "James has been hiding things from all of you, from me. He's been taking money from our account. He's been planning a divorce behind my back, and he's been lying about everything." Catherine shook her head, disbelief written all over her face. "Sofia, this can't be true. James wouldn't do that. He's your husband." "No," I said firmly, locking eyes with her. "He's not the man you think he is. He's been manipulating everyone, and now it's time for all of you to know the truth." There was a long silence as Catherine and Ben processed everything. They couldn't believe it, but I could see the pieces falling into place. The questions, the doubts they'd ignored for so long, they were finally being answered. The truth had started to spread, and James's carefully crafted image was beginning to crack. The days after I exposed James to Catherine and Ben were surreal. At first, they didn't know what to believe. I could see the doubt in their eyes, the hesitation as they processed everything. But as more time passed, the truth started to sink in. Slowly, the people around James began to pull away, one by one, as they realized just how far he had gone to manipulate everyone, including me. It was a strange feeling to watch everything I once thought was solid crumble. But deep down, I knew I had made the right choice. The shame I had felt for so long of living in a marriage where trust was nothing more than an illusion began to lift. I wasn't the one in the wrong here. James had used me, taken advantage of my love and loyalty, and now it was time for him to face the consequences. I didn't tell James that I had already reached out to our closest friends. I didn't have to. The truth was already starting to spread. One by one, people started to ask questions, confront him, and call him out on his behavior. The same people who had once adored him, who thought he was the perfect husband, the perfect father, well, they weren't so sure anymore. I couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction as I watched his world slowly unravel. For so long, he had made me feel small, invisible, like I was the one who was guilty of something I couldn't even understand. But now, he was the one facing the music. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about justice. James needed to know that the lies he had been telling, the games he had been playing, would no longer go unnoticed. Then came the phone call. It was from a lawyer. I didn't recognize the name, but the tone of the call made my heart race. "Mrs. Sophia," the voice on the other end said, "I represent James. He has filed for divorce." I paused for a moment, letting the words settle in. The shock of hearing it was like a punch to the gut, but at the same time, I wasn't surprised. I had known for a while that James had been planning this. What shocked me was the timing. He was taking action now. After everything that had happened, after I had exposed him to our friends, he was trying to salvage his image, to make himself appear like the innocent victim in all of this. "Divorce?" I repeated, my voice steady, though my mind was racing. "And what exactly does he want from me?" The lawyer paused before answering. "Mr. James is seeking full custody of the children and a substantial amount of alimony. He claims that you have been financially irresponsible and that your actions have damaged your marriage beyond repair." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This was his response to being exposed for everything he had done? He was trying to take everything from me, to twist the narrative to make me the villain in this story. "Well," I said, trying to keep my emotions in check, "tell Mr. James that I will be responding to his request shortly. I'm not going to let him control the narrative anymore." The lawyer sighed, as if he were already tired of the situation. "Very well, Mrs. Sophia. I will pass your response along." The call ended, and I sat there in stunned silence for a few moments. The audacity of James still left me speechless. After everything, after all the lies he had told, he thought he could simply walk away with everything he wanted. But he was wrong. I wasn't going to let him take my children or try to destroy me financially. I had already given up so much. This time, I would fight for what was mine. I immediately contacted a lawyer of my own, someone who specialized in high-conflict divorces. I wasn't going to play games with James anymore. I was going to take this to court if I had to. I wasn't going to let him destroy my reputation or my life without a fight. As the days passed, I started preparing for the battle ahead. I gathered all the evidence I had, every document, every email, every text message that proved how manipulative James had been. I wasn't just fighting for my freedom anymore. I was fighting for my children, for the truth, and for my dignity. I also made sure that Catherine and Ben were involved in the process. They were willing to testify if necessary, to speak about what they had learned about James's lies and deceit. They had seen him in his most charming moments, but they had also seen the darker side of him that I had been hiding from everyone. They would stand by me, and I knew that their support would be invaluable. The day before the court hearing, I sat with my lawyer, reviewing the case. The documents were all in order, the evidence was solid, and I felt ready. But there was still a part of me that wondered how James would react when he saw the full extent of his actions laid out before him. Would he back down? Would he try to make amends? Or would he continue down the same path of lies and manipulation? I didn't know the answer, but I didn't care anymore. I had made peace with the fact that the man I had once loved was gone. What mattered now was standing up for myself, for my children, and for the truth. The battle was about to begin. The day of the court hearing arrived, and I could feel the tension in the air. My stomach was tight, my thoughts were racing, and my heart pounded in my chest. I had spent weeks preparing for this day, gathering evidence, talking to my lawyer, and making sure I was ready for whatever James might throw at me. But nothing could have prepared me for the sheer weight of it all. When I walked into the courtroom, I could see James sitting there, looking just as confident and composed as he always did. He had a smug look on his face, as if he was still in control, still convinced that he would win this fight. But I knew something he didn't. This time, I was the one with the truth on my side. The judge called the case, and I felt the sharp sting of reality hit me as I sat down in front of the table. I glanced over at James, who was sitting with his lawyer, his eyes flicking nervously around the room. It was clear that he had no idea what was coming. He still thought he could manipulate the situation, that he could twist the truth in his favor. But he didn't realize that the evidence I had gathered was undeniable. There was no way for him to talk his way out of this one. The first few minutes of the hearing were tense, as both sides presented their initial arguments. James's lawyer tried to paint me as the villain, the irresponsible, reckless wife who had ruined the marriage with my spending and behavior. But I wasn't afraid. I had the facts, and I wasn't going to let them turn this into something it wasn't. When it was my turn to speak, I felt a rush of emotion. This was it. This was my chance to set the record straight, to show everyone who James really was, and to finally take back control of my life. I stood up and took a deep breath. Your Honor, I stand before you today not just as a wife or a mother, but as a woman who has been betrayed, manipulated, and controlled for far too long. What my husband is presenting here today is a lie. He has tried to paint me as a reckless woman, but the truth is, I have spent my entire life giving everything for our family. I've worked tirelessly to support him, to support our children, and to build a life that we could be proud of. But all of that was built on a foundation of lies. The courtroom was silent as I continued, my voice steady and calm, but full of conviction. For months, my husband has been spying on me, accusing me of things I haven't done. He hired a private investigator to follow me, to dig into my life, and to create a narrative that was completely false. He has been siphoning money from our joint account for months, using it for his own purposes while accusing me of financial irresponsibility. And he's been planning this divorce behind my back, preparing for it like it was some kind of business transaction. I paused for a moment to let my words sink in, and I could see James's face change. His arrogance was beginning to slip away, replaced by a look of panic. His lawyer tried to intervene, but I wasn't done. I wasn't about to let them take control of this moment. I've gathered all the evidence, Your Honor, I said, pulling out the files I had brought with me. Every document, every receipt, every email. These are the facts, and this is the man who has betrayed me. He's the one who has damaged this marriage, not me. I am asking for fairness, for justice, and for the truth to come to light. I handed the documents to the judge, and the room grew quiet as they were reviewed. The judge looked up at me, then at James, who was visibly sweating, trying to find a way out of this. James's lawyer tried to argue that it was all a misunderstanding, that I had misunderstood his client's intentions, but the evidence spoke for itself. There was no way to deny it anymore. The accusations James had thrown at me, the lies he had told, everything was exposed. By the time the judge made his ruling, I felt like I had already won. It wasn't just about the divorce anymore. It was about showing James that his lies, his manipulation, his attempt to control me were no longer going to work. He could no longer hide behind his charm and his lies. The truth was out, and he had no choice but to face it. The judge's verdict was clear. James would not receive full custody of our children. The assets would be divided fairly, and any further attempts to tarnish my character would not be tolerated. It was a victory, not just for me, but for the truth. I wasn't just walking away from this marriage. I was walking away stronger, more empowered, and more determined than ever to rebuild my life. As I walked out of the courtroom, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. The pain, the betrayal, the emotional turmoil. I could feel it all starting to fade. I had fought for what was right, and I had won. I wasn't just a victim anymore. I was a survivor. I had taken back control of my life, and I was ready for whatever came next. In the days that followed, the people who had once been on James's side started to reach out to me. Catherine and Ben, along with others who had learned the truth, offered their support. They told me how sorry they were for not seeing the signs earlier, for not standing up for me when I needed them most. But I didn't need their apologies. I had already forgiven them. What mattered now was that they understood the truth. James, on the other hand, retreated into himself. His world had come crashing down, and I knew he would never be the same again. But as far as I was concerned, he could live with the consequences of his own actions. I wasn't going to waste any more time or energy on him. It was time to move forward. I learned a valuable lesson throughout this whole experience. Never let anyone make you feel small. Never let anyone take away your voice. No matter what the world throws at you, you have the strength to stand up, to fight, and to take back what's yours. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more gripping tales of betrayal, revenge, and justice, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. You won't want to miss the next one. Stay tuned for more real-life inspired stories that will leave you on the edge of your seat. Thanks for watching.